It's time for another value-packed episode of Evolve Sales Live. Welcome back. I'm Jonathan Fisher. It's no secret that the right mindset is central to success in any endeavor. And if you're like most business professionals, you've heard lectures, read books on the topic of mindset, but have you mastered it? And even more importantly, what do you not know that could be limiting you? Are there hidden blockers that, if removed, could open up a pathway to a whole new level of performance and success? Well, our guest has some answers for us today. For over 20 years, Deano Sutter has been a highly regarded executive coach who's known for his ability to help clients clear the mental noise they may not even realize is hindering them. Highly sought after by famous Hollywood actors, showrunners and producers, Fortune 500 executives, CEOs, tech entrepreneurs, business professionals of all types, Deano has this uncanny ability to help clients uncover and effectively manage subconscious core triggers that otherwise control their behavior in unproductive ways. The overall goal of Deano's methodology is to become more emotionally intelligent, operate in greater consistency with one's own core values, and make greater strides on the path toward becoming a better self. Deano, super excited to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here as well.
So just jumping right in, you have this great background in helping folks discover blockers and reach better potential. Let's open it up with, who do you help and what are some of the typical challenges that they have, and what are some common blockages that people have that out there today in the professional space?
Yeah, so usually I'm helping high achievers, people who don't think that there's anything holding them back from achieving what they want, and that's why they're hidden blockers. So it's usually execs, as you mentioned. There's Fortune 500, there's CEO, showrunners, actors, you name it. I've dealt with it, and it's been very exciting because they're all different and all the same.
So, and just note from the live audience, if we could pick up your volume on your side there, Deano, in some form or fashion.
Okay, let me try. Better?
Don't want to miss a millisecond. So, so as you're dealing with folks, you and I were having some private conversation. A lot of your better clients may not be even aware that they have an issue. These are high-achieving people. How do you even broach that? What are some keys that, how do you open the conversation your end? I'm fascinated by that. But then for our listeners, what could they be looking for? Maybe they've already, hit some really great levels of success. How would they even know that they might need to tackle this project?
Yeah. So, there's two things. I always say, if there's anything in your life that you want that you do not have right now, it's probably because of the limitations you're placing on yourself. It's not from anyone else. You have the full capacity to do that. So I find that even if you're successful in a career, you may not be successful in a personal life, right? In romance or with your marriage or with your children. And so we all want to think that our brain can compartmentalize and say, oh, this is work brain and this is home brain and this is friend's brain. It doesn't work that way. The brain, the programs that are factoring in at home are the same ones that are factoring in at work. You're just not paying attention to them because you don't have somebody who's calling you on it, like maybe your spouse or your partner would be calling you on it. So I think everybody can recognize that there's something in their life that they either want, they don't have, or something that is preventing them from enjoying their life to the fullest. And one of the ways I always talk about it is with triggers. So if you get triggered at all, at any time, and a trigger is just a strong negative emotional response to any external stimulus. So you're driving down the road, somebody cuts you off, you yell expletives, or you shut down, or whatever's going on there, that's a trigger. You're having a conversation with a friend and you hear a word and you get mad, or you start spinning out and getting hyper-focused on that thing, you're being triggered. If you're walking in your living room and you catch the corner of your pinky toe on the coffee table and you bowl over and, whatever that is, you're getting triggered. And so if you can recognize that you are, in fact, somebody who gets triggered, which is literally everyone, then you can utilize my help, because the problem is when you're triggered, you're not present and you're not in control of the moment. The program is.
That's really interesting because the word triggered is used a lot right now, and we almost see that being used as a way to put the responsibility on somebody else, that they're creating a situation and I'm completely out of control and it's not even my fault. What are your feelings on that?
Well, that is a lie, and that is wrong, and that's an old program. So whenever you're being triggered, there's an external stimulus that you are making about you. So somebody said something, so you want to blame them. But what they said may had nothing to do with you. It's the way you're taking it. It's the old program that's taking you to, telling you to take this personal. This means something about you. And that's the problem. 100% of the time, if you're being triggered, it's on you, not on them. And so once you can start to take on that responsibility, the great thing is you actually have the power to change it. You just need to start to pick up on the tools on how to do that. And one of the things I always say is a trigger is a gift. Most people think it's a 4-letter word that starts with F. I always say, no, it's G, G-I-F-T. And the reason for that is because it tells you two very powerful and important things. Number one, what you care about. Because if you don't care, you are not triggered, right? If you know you're an a-hole and people call you an a-hole, you're like, high five, that's how I make all my money, right? But if you think you're kind and generous and somebody calls you an a-hole, what happens? You start to spin out, you make phone calls. If they're in the same friend circle, you tell all the friends, right? You cause all these issues and these problems when really that person was just having a bad day. It wasn't about you, but it does tell you what you care about. And number two, it tells you the underlying program that is leading you to feel the way you feel and act the way you act, if you know how to figure it out.
So instead of seeing this as a hindrance or something bothersome to be at best ignored, you actually see these moments of triggering as really helpful. You said the word gifts.
Yep.
And if we're smart, we can use them to learn something about ourselves. So could you give us some more examples of that, maybe even from your work, if you have a case study that pops to mind, where what are some of the things you might discover about yourself in a triggering situation?
So what's amazing about being triggered, if you know how to properly pay attention and address it and figure out what you care about, you can actually figure out what your highest core values are. A lot of people have a lot of values. I always ask my clients, name 10 values that you think are most important to you, and they list out everything. And then when we start doing the work, what they start to discover is majority of those are not their values at all. They've just been placed on them because we've had values placed on us by our family when we were little, by our teachers, by our friends, by our community, by society. And there is no such thing as a bad value. But if it's not your value, then you're in conflict. So if you pursue it and it's not aligned with you, then you're just creating friction and conflict in your life, which is going to trigger you. So I have clients that discover all kinds of things about themselves that they never even knew. One of my clients discovered that one of his biggest triggers is when somebody treats him as though he's irrelevant. And he didn't know that. He just couldn't figure out why the incompetence of all of his employees was a problem. And I'm sure that there's probably other owners out there or leaders out there who've had what they consider incompetent employees, but it really wasn't about their incompetence. He wasn't leading from the right place. And part of it was because every time they did that, he took it personal. If they didn't perform, it was personal because they were basically to him saying, you're irrelevant. I don't have to perform. When the reality was, so that was skewing the way he saw his employees, which also skewed his ability to lead them. And for them, it skewed the way that they can learn, because they also got super nervous about asking for questions, about getting clarifications, because they felt like every time they did, he would jump on them because, again, he thought it meant that he was irrelevant if they were asking these things, which sounds silly. And he didn't even know it was going on until he did. Yeah.
So where'd he go from there? I mean, I'm sure that the people working for him just thought, yeah, that's a classic a-hole type A leader, or maybe he just has too big of an ego or those kinds of things coming his way, where really, I mean, the need to feel relevant is certainly a legitimate one. Doesn't make you an egomaniac at all. What was his process of discovery? Where did he go from there?
Right. So once you can start to discover what the underlying programs and also the values are, right? So the value is the opposite of that program. If that program tells you, you know, you're getting triggered every time somebody treats you as irrelevant, then the opposite would be, I am significant, right? And so once you start to understand that, you start to understand your highest core values, and then you can align to it. So the people you bring into your life right now, there's probably a number of them that trigger you, but the reason why they're triggering you is because they have a different value system. It doesn't make them bad or good, which is really nice because it doesn't make it a judgment call. It just makes it a right or left. So once you start to understand what your highest core values are and what the programs are that are hindering you, then you can start to align your life and things become easier. Then you see these questions and these other things in a new light. You actually change the code. And to explain that, let me also explain my philosophy on how the brain works. So your brain is a supercomputer. The gift of it being a supercomputer, or the advantage, the good news, is that it has endless capacity to process any program and create any reality you want in your life. But there's a catch. It only processes the programs you feed it, and 90% of those are on autopilot, and they come from the past. And those programs are the same ones that, example would be walking and talking, right? Right now, you don't think about how we form sounds with our mouths or how we move all the muscles in our legs and our body to move us forward. But guess what? When you were 1 or 2 or 4 or 5, it was really challenging. And it took a lot of concentrated effort. But the more and more you repeated that program, the more it got put into your subconscious, and runs on autopilot. So now you don't have to think about it at all. Well, the same time we were learning that is also the same time we were learning how to deal with complex emotional situations, environments. And some of those, when they got repeated over and over and over, they got stored also into our subconscious, and they're running on autopilot. That's why we call them hidden blockers. They're hidden programs that we don't even know exist. We just think this is the way I am. I'm a hothead. I'm overly sensitive. I'm ugly. I'm smart. Or if I fail at this, I'm a failure. Whatever those are those hidden programs that are sitting in our subconscious. And triggers are the way that you can actually get access to figure out what it is. Because right now in the subconscious, the problem is it's on autopilot. Again, 90% of your day, the decisions you make, you're not making. They're being made by the programs from the past. And so we have to bring the subconscious into awareness and to conscious awareness. And when you do that, then you can start to look at the programs and go, well, which ones actually serve me today and my future? Not what served me in my past, but what served me today and serve the future I want. And so that's part of the work. And it's fun, it's hard, but it's a lot of fun, and it's freedom.
Yeah, for sure. So I'd love to go even deeper on this then as we move forward. So some of the examples of some of those hidden inner messages, you've already named a couple. I wonder if you could maybe share a few more with us. So you talked about significance. You talked about some negative self-imaging that we have. What are some other sort of those hidden software programs you talk about that you bump into? So, like you see them every day.
Yeah. So we should talk about what is, so if the brain is a supercomputer, right, it means it's all based on code, right? And just like if you get a virus in your computer and it starts to give you glitches or shuts down your program over and over, you don't blame the program or the computer, right? You deal with the virus. The problem with us is we don't realize or recognize that we have viruses. So all we do is we blame ourselves. So how many of you out there beat yourself up, kick yourself when you're down, have something happen and then blame your own inequity or your own insufficiencies for why this thing happened? We all do it, but it's because we're not paying attention to the virus. We just think we are the computer and the virus is part of the computer. It doesn't have to be. And so we have to pay more attention. And I'll give you an example. This is one of my clients, super successful, has a lot of zeros after his net worth, runs companies. And he came to me, paid me, shows up on day one and says, I don't think this is going to work. I'm going to go ahead and leave. And I said, okay, tell me more. And obviously there was a fear factor that was going in. And I said, okay, I'll bite. Tell me what's going on. And he said, well, I think you're going to want me to change things about myself that I don't want to change. And I said, all right. I mean, I don't know. Tell me what they are. And he said, well, right now I drink 4 to 6 drinks every night to go to bed. I hire prostitutes and I dabble in meth. So I'm like,
other than that, he was doing fine.
Other than that. And by the way, this came to me because he was having struggles with his business, but also in his personal life with dating. Ironic. So, and my response to him was, well, listen, my job is not to change you. I don't actually have the power to change anyone, but I can equip you with the tools to figure out the best version of you. And if the best version of you drinks 4 to 6 drinks every night, hires prostitutes and dabbles in meth, God bless. But if it's, but the only way you're going to find out is to work with me. And so he said, okay, I'll stay for 1. And within a month, he stopped drinking during the week and only socially drank on the weekends. We never once discussed drinking. Within 2 months, he's not hiring prostitutes or dabbling in meth. We never discussed the meth or the prostitutes after that. And within 3 months, we had fixed his boardroom and the relationships he had there and improved his relationships with his family, with his friends. In fact, one of his friends said, "Can we keep this version of you? Because this is the version we always wanted." And what's really interesting is, and he said this to me around the end of the first month, because he had some big things happen. And he said, "You know what, Deano, this is the first time I've ever felt in control." Mind you, comes from wealth, has a ton of wealth, good looking, intelligent, fit, has everything at his disposal except for control. Because if you cannot control how you act in the middle of a trigger, then you are not in control. Whether you are Jeff Bezos or you're the guy who sweeps the floor, it does not matter. You are not in control. And that's what the system does, is it helps give people tools so that they can start to equip themselves to interrupt their triggers, interrupt the old programs, and do something about them.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you did an end run around his objection to what I think most people would agree are some moral issues. And that was part of his own incongruity. You talk about alignment with one's own values. Some of these are going to be universal. I mean, he knew he shouldn't be doing some of those things. But rather than argue the point or make it specifically about the morality, where he would just the hackles would remain high. Yeah. We did an end run around that, and we tapped into the power of the will, which is kind of an amazing thing. Yep. So I wonder, Deano, if you wouldn't mind for our audience, like outline more of your methodology. How does it work? What are the steps? How could someone begin to engage on something like this process?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I'll give you the recommendation. Like, obviously, it's a little bit more complex and it takes months. So it's not as easy just to give you, but I'll give you a couple tips. So the first tip that I give everyone is create a trigger journal. Sounds weird, but I will define. So a trigger is just a strong negative.
Is that something for the shooting range or something like that? Oh, no, wait, you're talking about something different.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can do that too. You can
different trigger.
That's right. So the idea is you just want to capture what happened, not the backstory. Most people are tempted to give me the story about, let's say it's their spouse that said something and they want to say, well, but you have to understand that she said this 30 other times and this leans into this. And it's like, no, it doesn't matter. And this is the hardest part for people. It's never about the other person. It's never about their actions. It's never about what their history or your history with them is. It is always about you. So what I always tell people, to create a trigger journal, all you do is I've got an iPhone, create a folder in your notes. And each day you start, and called triggers. And each day you start with the date. And then underneath it, every time you get triggered, you just journal it. So 9:10 a.m., stubbed my toe. That's all you have to put. You just put what the actual moment was, not the backstory, not that somebody moved the coffee table while you weren't looking, not that, the dog's toys were on there. I don't care about any of that. All you want to do is bring up what the moment was. And by doing that and starting to journal that, what you start to do is pay attention. And the problem is, again, the triggers are telling us what we care about and also what the program is. And so we need to bring awareness to the programs. We have to bring it out of the subconscious into the conscious. And the best way to do that is to start to notice. Most of us walk through the day without ever paying attention. And usually the same program that made you super successful is also the same program that's holding you back from enjoying that success. And so you have to start to bring awareness. So that's the first suggestion. As I tell you, if you don't have at least 10 by noon, you're probably not paying attention. So you should be journaling what your triggers are. And that's just an awareness builder. You start that process. And then the second thing that I always say is, once you start to pick up on the fact that you're being triggered in the moment, use these two words. That's interesting. What it does is, in your mind, it takes you from accusation mode into investigation mode. So in our mind, when we're being triggered, we're placing accusation on somebody or something for making us feel this way, right? Somebody cuts us off. The story is they think they're more important. They don't care about the world. They're a bad citizen, like whatever it is, right? We're building all this story in our head that is then triggering all these emotions, which then are going to lead us to action, right? That's either we step on the gas and right up on their back end. We cut them off. We yell at them, obscenities from inside our car, whatever it is, or we shut down and we feel bad about ourselves. Whatever's going on there. But that's all because of an accusation mode, right? And when we're accusing them, we're also telling a story about us. And so we need to interrupt that. And the best way to interrupt that is to say, that's interesting. Because your mind is always listening. And when it hears the words, that's interesting, the mind goes, oh, what's interesting? So you're in this loop, you're in this program, you're in this pattern, and you're interrupting it right there and allowing yourself to not become the accuser, but to become the investigator. So the difference is the DA comes to the scene and says, the husband did it, get me the data, right? The investigator or detective comes and says, don't touch anything. We have to take everything, put it all together so that we can get a picture of actually what's going on here. No accusation yet. Let's put together information and then start to see where it leads us. That's what we're doing. We're moving away from accusation. This person's bad. This thing is bad. I'm bad, to what's going on.
I love that. So to really kind of, is this kind of giving yourself a little time as well to assess, like the triggers, it seems to me you're talking about something that's lightning fast. You know, not only is it subconscious, but that pre-programmed emotional response is instantaneous. So are you kind of buying some time here? Is that part of the goal?
Yeah, of course. Because I always say that a trigger is like a super highway, right? There's one entrance, there's one exit, and it happens in a millisecond. And what you're trying to do is stretch it out. Because when you're on a super highway, there's a big difference between a millisecond and 2 seconds. With 2 seconds, I can look for other off-ramps. I can look for other options that might actually serve my purpose, because the off-ramp I've been going off of, it just leads me off a cliff. And it's led me there over and over and over. And by the way, every time I go back down that same path, experience that same thing, I'm getting the same result and I'm reinforcing it. I'm actually building myelin around the neural network, that program, which is making it fire quicker. Just like electricity, the best way to make it fire quicker is to insulate it more. It's the same with our brain. When you have a thought, it's a neural synapse. When you have an experience tied to it, it's a neural pathway. When you repeat it within a certain different experiences, it becomes a neural network. And the more you repeat that over and over and over, the more it gets stored into the subconscious. And so we have to bring it from there to the conscious, and then we have to start to recode it. We have to start to change what the program is, because I should also say there's no delete button. You can't pretend things didn't happen in the past and they won't affect you in the present. Every single thing that's ever happened is there. There is no delete, but the meaning you put to every single thing there can be changed. You can change what the program means so that the way you interact in the present is completely different from the way you've acted in the past, and also change the trajectory to where you're going to go in the future.
That's some good stuff. Hey, a friendly reminder to our live audience, we do want to have some time for question and answer while we're still live with our guest today. So start sending in your questions in the chat section, and we'll get to those after we're done with our conversation here at the bottom of the half hour. So, Deano, when you are taking this time to journal your triggers and you're giving yourself some time to kind of analyze, and you're using this pattern interrupter of that's interesting, what's the next step?
Well, so usually with my clients, what we do is a thing called the anatomy of a trigger. So Viktor Frankl talked about the fact that there is a space between stimulus and response, and in that space is freedom. It's the freedom of choice. If you don't know who Viktor Frankl is, he wrote Man's Search for Meaning after the Holocaust, after being in it. So what he's talking about there is really when you're triggered, right? There's a stimulus and there's a response. And what he's saying is there's a space inside there. And in that space is freedom. It's the freedom of choice. What I do is I take people through what we call the anatomy of a trigger, where we stretch out every component of what happened in that trigger, and we analyze it so that we start to create the space. And then with my clients, I work them through something called alchemy. So the problem with thinking, by the way, there's nothing wrong with thinking, but thinking that you can change or transform with a thought is that it doesn't work that way. Unless you're connecting the mind with the body, the thought with an experience, nothing transforms ever. So how many times have you been triggered? Maybe it's a common fight you have with a partner or a spouse or a friend, and you know it's going to come, or maybe with a parent, right? And that same thing happens every single time. And you say, next time I'm going to do something different. And every time when you're in that pressure cooker and it's coming at you, what happens? The exact same thing. So you have to be able to change that. And so I work with my clients. I have a meditation called Alchemy, where we actually transform it, because what happens is you can't go back and tell your boss or your business partner, hey, you remember when you were an a-hole to me last week? Can you say those things again? Because I want to deal with it differently this time. Like, it doesn't work. or try that with your spouse. Hey, remember when you belittled me last week and made me feel really crappy?
Yeah.
Can you do that again so I can see if I can? It doesn't work. Even by setting it up, it doesn't work. So with alchemy, what you do is you actually leverage the anatomy of a trigger in a meditative state, have a transformation, go back, and you experience it in a fresh new way. And the key to meditation is your brain doesn't know the difference between reality and non-reality. So when it's experiencing it in the meditation, it's real life. And it's actually creating new neural synapses, pathways, and networks. And the more you repeat it, not on the same thing, because there's not that many negative programs that are dictating. There's millions of stimulus, but they're all tapping into some of these really strong negative ones. And once you can start to diffuse them, you actually solve a lot of these other issues and problems. But you have to have a method to do that.
Well, and I love this focus on the fact that this is physical work that we're doing. We're literally talking, if you weren't really keyed in, audience, we're talking about literally physically changing how your brain is wired, right? We're talking about sort of breaking and reestablishing neural pathways and creating new neural networks to lead to some better subconscious responses in the future. Unless I'm mistaken on that, Deano, am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it. If you have a negative auto response that you know happens every time, let's say somebody says the word crazy and it brings you back and whatever. If you could change it that every time that word crazy came up and instead it delivered an entirely different response that you were super proud of, what would that be worth? How does that work in your life, right? That's what we're talking about. And with the new discoveries, and I hate to say discoveries because they've existed for, years and years and years anecdotally, but now we have tons of studies supporting NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, and also epigenetics, which is you can switch on and off DNA. You can switch on and off the way things happen in your own life. And these are all now scientifically proven. So that's what we're dealing with, is founded on scientific proof. It's not woo-woo. And obviously anecdotally in my clients' lives, the impact's massive.
Well, and there's no question that there's some good application of some solid psychology here that you're putting, you're putting some hands and feet on this for folks that are out there living in the real world, executives. I love that. What would be the best way for somebody who is an executive right now then to take what they've heard today? Like, what would you, so your methodology, I think we kind of have in terms of the 30,000 foot. Obviously, there's a lot more that we would need to go into. But what would you recommend for someone right now today who would like to put something into practical use from our conversation?
Yeah, again, I would say start with the trigger journal. Keep track of that. Start leveraging the phrase, that's interesting, and become more and more aware. There's other things that I would suggest on top of that, which is if you don't have a gratitude journal, you've heard it 1,000 times before, and you're always like, oh, why would I do that? Trust. It shifts the way your mind works. Our mind is built for survival, not for success. Because it's built for survival, we always look for what could go wrong so that we can make sure to avoid it so we can survive. And you have to trick, and I say trick, but you have to train your brain to shift from survival into gratitude or into a mode that is for you. And the easiest way to do it is to create a gratitude journal. And what I suggest, start it at the top and write, today's going to be a great day. And then write 10 gratitudes. And the way you do it is, I am thankful for, or I am grateful for, and then why. So because of, boom. That's it. If you did that for 30 days, you would see your entire mindset shift over those 30 days where people would probably come up and say you're doing something different. They would know it.
Yeah,
they would see it. And again, it's these incremental changes. It's not these big, hitting it out of the ballpark changes that we all want. It's the little incremental steps that make us a little bit better every single day to where people can't deny who we are now, nor can we. We shift and we change and we become.
I love it. Well, this has been a great conversation today, Deano. The time has flown by. How can our listeners take next steps to learn more about your insights?
So I am offering everybody a free ebook. I'm not going to mention the title on here because it's not safe for work, but you'll understand once you go to the website. So if you go to deanosutter.com/free book, it's not out yet. But when it comes out, I will make sure to send you a copy. And the reason why, so I'm still in the process of it. I'm working with my editors. We're trying to finish it up. But it's basically what I'm doing in the book is I'm taking what I'm telling you about now and making sure that everybody in the world has access to it. And so that book will actually give tips, tools, and equip people, but it'll also do it through some really fantastic stories of my clients and them overcoming. So it should be really fun. Hopefully around 120 pages, easy read, something you could read on the plane, but that's my gift, free to everyone. And then if they want, there will be a Calendly link in there where if you want to set up some time to find out more, you can.
Love it. All right. Well, Deano, we're going to jump into some Q&A here in just a few moments. If you can stick around for another 10, 12 minutes with us, we'd be grateful for that. Before we get that, a friendly reminder, our show is sponsored by Overpass.com. Overpass is the world's leading low-cost solution for hiring high-quality salespeople fast. With thousands of highly qualified, ready-to-work professionals waiting to meet you, Overpass allows you to hire a whole team in just days instead of weeks. Create your free account and see just how easy it is for yourself at Overpass.com. So let's jump into some of the questions that we have from our audience here. I did see one was wondering, what would be, from Dennis, what would be some applications to your team? Like, we didn't really get into that much in the conversation. It was very one-to-one, but and I kind of had the thought in my own mind as well. So we have values and attunement happening on an individual level. That may even lead to clashes I could see happening if those aren't aligned. Like, talk to us a little bit about applications to teams.
It's funny because I've actually developed out a corporate workshop that I've been doing with a couple companies, because a lot of the people I work with run companies, and they're like, how do we apply this to our teams? And so in the workshop, it gives the same tools and skills and gets people to start talking on the same vernacular. But I think, again, it's one of those things where awareness is key and communication is key. So if you want your teams to improve, the reason why you may have internal conflict or maybe not delivering at the highest potential is probably because of a communication issue, and also their programs. So remember, just the same way you grew up with these programs from the past that are limiting or dictating your present and limiting your future, so did every other person. So if somebody has a imposter syndrome, which I've had, most of my clients have, they may be less likely to ask the questions they need to get the answers they need in order to be as productive as they need to. So they need to start being offered up tools so that there's a freedom to do that. And I think even by leaders starting to understand that the same way that they have programs everybody else does, they can pay more attention. The more they pay attention to their triggers, the more they'll pay attention and see other people getting triggered. So in that, then you can ask questions. Oh, I just saw that. What happened? What's going on? And that starts to open up the gateway. And we all know for retention purposes, the most important thing is trust, right? So trust in your boss, faith in your boss, liking your boss, which means they're probably active listening. They're probably actively engaging, and you feel like they're for you, not against you. And there's a ton of leaders out there who don't realize that what they're communicating by not actively listening or paying attention to other people's triggers or understanding that not everybody is like them, they're actually undercutting that and severing that trust and creating their own retention issues and also productivity issues.
Yeah, it sounds like, you're learning to give empathy almost to yourself, and this is maybe helping grow your empathic abilities with your teammates as well, is kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it changes when you start changing yourself. So I have a separate program that I do, which is a men's club. And, there's 3 pillars to it: internally grow, externally connect, and achieve meaningful impact. And it's been going fantastic. But one of the reasons for it was because every single person out there is trying to figure out, how do you apply this? How do you grow? How do you become more? And we don't really have the tools. And so it's really about accessing and getting those tools to be able to deliver on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, another one from Dennis while we're on his couple of questions. He was also wondering, are there ways to chart or discover better solutions other than just the journal? So you talk about the trigger journal, the gratitude journal. What else could in terms of actual piece of pen and piece of paper, are there other methodologies that can help you discover?
Yeah, all of it.
Solutions?
All of it's going to involve writing and going in. It's hard. It's hard work. We want the easy solution. It's not easy. You know, I have people who come to me who are high achievers and are like, well, this won't really affect me, but I'll do it anyways. And then all of a sudden it's like, phew. So it is, you can keep track. And I would also say one of the things that we don't do in ours because it's not necessary, but I think that would help outside of it is if you're getting triggered, you know, you can actually write down what the whole scenario is, and even taking it and putting it from in here out to here, it changes. Because once you start to read it and start to perceive that the information, the accusations, once it's in here, anything can happen, right? Emotions don't, especially negative emotions, don't travel by themselves. They always travel in vicious packs, right? They pick up their friends. You know, oh, that means I'm lonely, and this means I'm angry, and this means I'm, you know, irresponsible, and this means whatever. So, but when you put it to paper and you start to read it and you start to look at it, things change. Your perspective changes. So even by doing that, you can actually start to diffuse and help yourself in those situations. Now, to have true transformation, you do need to not only have the thought and interrupt, but you do need to have the experience attached with it where you actually start to experience something different. But you can do that with that journal or journal / whatever you want to call it, when you're writing out the trigger and the whole scenario. That is physically doing something different than you've ever done before. That is bringing awareness, and that can interrupt it. And the next time, because you've had this experience, that can help to start shifting things.
Okay. I love it. From Bruce Hill, he was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing one of your most challenging clients.
Well, so one of my, you know, the most challenging are always your favorite, right? I already told you a little bit about the one guy who was 4 to 6 drinks, meth and all that. Another one of mine was somebody who came to me because he said, there's something wrong. I always hire the wrong people. So he ran a big development company, was bringing on people from major companies, contracts in the millions, and bringing them on. And then within 6 weeks to a few months, they were failing him, and he was having a problem, and he couldn't figure it out. And, you know, he was very combative. He thought he was trying to instruct me on how the system should be better. Which I always love. I'm like, hey, listen, trust the process. Don't trust the process. And so it was super funny. And then one day he had an aha. And really what was happening before was he wasn't doing the work as much as he needed to. And when he did, he started to realize things. And so one of the things he realized was all the people he hired represented the kids who made fun of him in high school, who were the cool kids because he wasn't cool. So now he would hire these, by the way, tons of money, super successful, has a beautiful house, married, kids, like he's got it. And yet in his mind, he was still the awkward, lanky, goofy guy who couldn't have this world. And so he tried to surround himself by these people. But as soon as he did, what he would do is start to project on them to bring him down to where he thought he was, instead of assuming he's where they are. And so then he would start to undercut their opportunities to do what they were brought in to do. He would question everything. He would micromanage. And it was all coming from his insecurities and his own issues. But he didn't realize it. He just thought, I have a habit of hiring all the wrong people. And once we started working, within 3 months, he said, I actually am really good at hiring great people. And I said, oh, yeah? And not a single person was new. So it was just an entire shift. And the entire team was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what you're doing, but whatever it is, keep it up. And obviously he started telling people what he was doing and got referrals out of it. But it was just as a shift. But again, it takes somebody who recognizes there's an issue and then humbles themselves enough to accept that you have to trust a process and a system if you want anything to change. Because if you keep doing exactly what you've always done and expecting a different result, what do we call that? Insanity. Yeah. So
insanity. Yeah.
Exactly.
Famous. Yeah. I love it. I love it. I'm getting multiple questions. I think several of our audience members have spotted Jung as one of the influences on your thinking. Obviously, Viktor Frankl, he's one of my personal favorites, and I actually took the trouble of adding his title, Man's Search for Meaning, in the notes here. Recommend that as a good read. Are there other sources for our audience? Besides, obviously, your free book offer is fantastic. Other sources you could recommend?
So one of the people that I love is Dr. Daniel Amen. He's written probably about 20 or 30 books. And he is a psychiatrist that actually started doing what they call spec brain mapping, which and has hundreds of thousands of studies, and really he's kind of on the forefront of that, of the physical neuroscience of mapping that. But I love all of his stuff, so I think he's fantastic. I also am a huge fan of Dr. Stephen Hayes. So he has ACT, which is his philosophy or his therapy style, which is acceptance commitment therapy. So I love his stuff. And, I just think there's so many really powerful, great people out there. Joe Dispenza is another big fan, I'm a big fan of. So he runs these retreats that are phenomenal. They're week-long retreats. I think now he's only doing the advanced, and he's doing the others as a digital online thing. But fantastic. And also deals with the brain. He's very science-based, but it will come across a little more mystical because some of his claims, but his claims are all backed up by studies and proof, which I love. So those are three people I would highly recommend that I think are making big strides in this space.
Well, Deano, I think you're helping folks make some big strides, and so we're grateful that you've been here with us today. It's been a fascinating program. So on behalf of Overpass, our whole audience today, thanks for being with us.
Appreciate you.